Welcome to Unit 5 of EDSE 512. Our focus in this unit will be the initial evaluation. And on the course schedule, you will see that we do not have a discussion in this unit, but that instead we will be focused upon Case Study Part 2. So this is a continuation of what you've done for Case Study Part 1. You'll be moving forward with the same student you selected for evaluation, eligibility, and consent. And we will talk through those assignment expectations. Oh, by the way, here in readings, you'll see a reference to the procedural guidance for IEPs. So you can go to critical documents if you're in modules. You may have seen this already. But right above Unit 5, you'll see a tab for critical documents. And procedural guidance is in there, along with many other forms and things that might be helpful to you as we move forward, especially with some of this case study work. There is a PowerPoint here, and all of the information is also in the procedural manual that I was just mentioning. But we will be talking about the evaluation process, and that all will be covered here in this presentation. Again, it's a fairly lengthy presentation, so we won't go through the entire thing right now. However, as we know, in special education, there is an evaluation process, and that might be through a multi-tiered system of support, interventions. Those interventions may not be effective to the point where we're not seeing the growth that we want to see. Or if you've got a younger student, you might be working with Child Find. It just depends upon the situation. But ultimately, we're falling into this initial evaluation. So a child will be referred for special education evaluation, and we will receive consent for that evaluation signed by the parent or guardian, and then go through that evaluation process, testing in all areas in which we've identified concern. And for an initial, you really want to test in almost everything for most situations, just to get screeners at least done for communication, for instance, the cognitive component, just to have that body of evidence with that multidisciplinary team to really establish the case for whatever argument you're going to make as a team, eligibility wise, because you're then moving to the eligibility determination. So there would be a meeting in which the team will come together along with the parents or guardians and discuss eligibility, going through that criteria for the student based on the results of that comprehensive evaluation. This will then move into the development of the IEP document. And that IEP document, if the child is found eligible, obviously that's the only way that we'd be getting an IEP. The IEP will be hitting upon all the needs identified in the evaluation and the areas of difficulty or deficit, and it'll be building upon the student's strengths as well. So it's going to be quite individualized. That's where the I comes from. And the team will be developing and then implementing that together, sharing it with the family and providing those services, IEP snapshots and accommodation information to all of the teachers, and then progress reporting and progress monitoring for those IEP goals as the student continues to receive services. So that's the big picture of special education process. It's a nice visual to look into. And then you'll continue to reevaluate the student. At the most, that will happen once every 3 years. That's the longest period of time that you'll go without a reevaluation. Sometimes reevaluations will happen sooner, and that could be maybe if the IEP is not at all working and the child is struggling greatly, and we need to consider whether the placement is in fact the least restrictive environment, or whether there's another eligibility category that might be considered. There are some situations where we will do a reevaluation sooner rather than later. This is a flowchart visual for us, again, talking through the process of an IEP that is connected to grade level standards. So you'll need to look clearly at the present levels of performance section in the IEP, and then you've got those goals that are aligned with the grade level academic standards for the student, even if the goal itself is not a skill that's grade level, for instance, like write a 5-paragraph essay. That might not be the IEP goal. The IEP goal might be to construct a solid paragraph, or working on sentence structure or intro, body, and conclusion. But the grade level standard could be to write a 5-paragraph essay, because we know that the goal in place is a fundamental skill related to a student being able to meet that grade level standard. So those goals will also be measurable, obviously. And then we'll be going through reporting out on progress. And in the IEP process, we're also designing those accommodations and or modifications. Again, accommodations, changes to the way that the content is delivered or presented, the modifications being changes to the content itself, and then determination of how the student will participate in assessment. So that's directly tied to the accommodations section, because if a student has an accommodation in the IEP of extended time, for instance, you would want to then transfer that to state assessments and standardized testing as well. As we've talked about acronyms, there are so many. A couple visuals here, this visual included for you, as well as this link with some more key terms to know in special education. You may be very familiar with all of these acronyms, and you may find that in your state or county or district, some of these are used a little bit differently or have changed over time. But the fact remains that there are an enormous number of acronyms in this field. And this is really just a little comical to see all of them in one place. But it's a reminder that there are acronyms even that are not on this list, and that we need to be very careful in the language that we use, not only with parents or guardians, but also with students and also with other staff members, such as general education teachers. I can guarantee that probably there are acronyms on this list that even we ourselves would not have known, and we're studying and working in the field. So please, when in doubt, don't use them. I have had parents and guardians actually stop a meeting and say to me, please stop using acronyms. And I work hard to not use them in my practice, but sometimes they just come out of our mouths because they're easier. It's easier to say SED than serious emotional disability, or FBA, functional behavioral assessment. And it's the language that we use on a daily basis with colleagues in special education. So again, do avoid those and just break down the topics in a way that people can understand who are not at the graduate level in special education, because most parents and families have not studied in that regard, and they deserve that respect of communication with words that are meaningful to them, not throwing out the acronyms as if there's somebody who's working in the field. Here is a page about involving the student and family. Obviously, this is essential. You'll see the word parent here on occasion as you read through this. Just remember that would apply to guardian. It could be foster parent. It could be a family member who is not a parent. It's whoever is responsible with educational custody for the child at that time. And that may be one person or more than one person. So obviously, family participation is key. They are arguably the most important members of the IEP team, other than the student, who we hope will join us as soon as possible, depending upon development and grade level and what is most appropriate, and that can look different for different students. I've seen students who are quite young participate well, even in parts of the IEP meeting, which is very exciting. So it always is an option, but for some students, waiting until a later time might be more appropriate. And we definitely encourage that engagement in middle school and high school, even, as I said, if it's not for the whole meeting, just for part of it. Again, this is what we mentioned previously, the referral for special education. If the RTI MTSS process has been in place and we're not seeing the growth or the response that we're looking for, student may come in with a variety of needs that is, observed. These needs are noticed by the team. And then this referral would start the evaluation process, and the family would have to provide consent for that evaluation, and the procedural safeguards, the parent right document, would be provided to them as well. And then we have to get that done and provide a notice of meeting, go through eligibility, and then if eligible, the student would have an IEP. Prior written notice. This is included in a lot of different situations in the IEP. Basically, the prior written notice is a procedural safeguard, and it is the concept that an action is being proposed or refused by the school district. We have to explain why we are taking that action and refer to the data from the most recent evaluation or any records that are relevant. This would include information regarding the procedural safeguards and protections and rights for parents and families. And then obviously the information for assistance is provided to them within those procedural safeguards as well. We want to talk about what was considered and what was rejected and any other factors at that time. So this is if we're taking an action, this would be included in each IEP. If a change of placement is happening, for instance. And so it's always good to do one of these. If you're not sure if you should create a PWN and document a decision, your answer probably is yes. It's better safe than sorry. And we'll have the opportunity to do a PWN as we're working through case study process. So listed here, there are many different times, either proposal or refusal of these 4 things, which would be identification for the student and evaluation, the placement, so if we're going through a change of placement, and the identification of free and appropriate public education for that student and what that's going to look like. So here's a form. This is the prior written notice and consent for the evaluation, and this is what it will look like. The school is proposing to either evaluate or reevaluate, listing the areas, again, be as comprehensive as possible, and the reasons. What have we tried that hasn't worked, and what are we looking at for eligibility and considering potential for special education services. This right side here would say we are not evaluating, but for the purposes of this course, we would be going with the left side. Yes, we are. And then the proposal is based on records, tests, procedures, reports. We need to have hard evidence and our reason for evaluation. We can't just do it out of the blue. So we need to share what we've considered, such as going on with RTI or going on with general education alone, for example, and the reason that we've rejected it. Why are we aware that that's not going to work and not going to be in the best interest of the student? And then we need to list any other factors. Sometimes you'll see NA here, not applicable. Avoid that at all costs. We need to be as comprehensive and detailed on these documents as we can. There's always a factor to consider, information given by the family or something that has been observed with the student or a previous IEP. So think about what you can include here as you're working on this for the case study. And then down below, more information regarding consent where a parent could sign and date. Really good detail here, especially for your case study project. So please do review those directions as well. The notice of meeting document, quite straightforward. It's just proposing and sharing the purpose of the meeting. Is it an IEP meeting? Is it an eligibility meeting? What factors will be taken into consideration? Who will be there? And then you're signing that as the case manager. So this is just it's kind of like a party invitation. It's a formal document saying here's when and where and why and how, and this is who's going to be there, kind of a thing. So that's for the family to receive. Evaluation. Obviously, we're trying to determine if a student is eligible for special education services. Here is a good list of the areas of functioning that will be evaluated. And even if some of these are screeners and we're finding that the student does not need one of these, it's still good to include, especially with an initial, just to make sure that there's not an area of concern that we're missing. So again, a variety of assessments in variety of settings with different individuals. That is the concept of the multidisciplinary team. And then the determination of eligibility, we need to confirm that the evaluation is comprehensive, that the child can or cannot benefit from general education alone. So if a child is eligible for special education, obviously we're going to say, no, the child cannot receive reasonable educational benefit from general education alone. We can be eligible for special education in many of these areas. This could be for specific learning disability is the example provided here. Basic reading, reading fluency, you'll see mathematical calculations, several areas. And then we just need to give evidence that family has been notified and that these issues are not primarily the result of cultural factors or economic disadvantage. We need to rule all of that out. So again, the eligibility categories are provided for you here. And all of this will be related to your case study assignment. You will want to make a solid paper trail. Keep everything. If you're not sure, you can upload and scan it, and that'll allow you to recycle some things. If the IEP is not working, as we talked about a little bit earlier, that would be the point to consider a re-evaluation. And then we've got information on alternate state standards. And these are used with a very small percentage of students, but this would be students with significant support needs who are working with extended evidence outcomes. So this is the idea of modification.